I've really been thinking about the Jersey Devil, and there's a lot of things about the Jersey Devil that people don't really think about. The Jersey Devil really hasn't been, a topic of discussion for the last century, but back in the day, he was big news. Benjamin Franklin really hated him. He had a business opponent, Benjamin Franklin did, Benjamin Franklin said that this guy had sex and gave birth to the Jersey Devil, the Leeds Devil. Anyway, the Jersey Devil, it's the sort of thing where you can put all kinds of stock into different people's opinions and beliefs about the Jersey Devil. But when it comes down to it, it's pretty simple. It's a dragon-like, draconic. It's got the scales, and it's got the teeth of a reptile. But it's got like sort of hoof-like hooves, horse-like hooves. And that's why it leaves those tracks. Now, a lot of people think it has wings, but I don't think it. My experience, it doesn't. It can't fly, but it can run very fast and jump very high. And it is a consummate predator. It's an apex predator, like a shark or a wolf or a big cat. It's just wherever it lives, it's the thing on the top of the food chain, unless we're kicking its butt. And considering no one really thinks this thing really even exists these days, we're not the ones kicking its butt anymore. Now, with the name of Jersey Devil, you sort of think that it might be confined to New Jersey. And that is, in fact, the locale that made the Jersey Devil famous. It's not really a devil, though. And it's not just from New Jersey. If you look at any animal and you go to Wikipedia, you can usually find like a map that will show its range, where an animal will live, what areas. And if you did that for the Jersey Devil, and if Wikipedia wasn't a liberal site made by the government that spreads lies, it would show the range of the Jersey Devil. And it's definitely the northeastern United States, that part of Canada up around Newfoundland and Halifax, and it goes all the way. It doesn't really live in the south anymore. So if you follow, you can follow around down to Ohio, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and it goes all the way up into the eastern side of Montana. It doesn't really go over the Rockies, and you won't really run into any on the west coast, although you might run into one or two on the Pacific Northwest that's not really in their main range. Now, personally, I've dealt with these things in Minnesota, and there's more than you would think around here. There's still a lot of woods in Minnesota. It's part of the Midwest, but it's not. When you picture the Midwest, you picture something more like Iowa, North Dakota, maybe Illinois, and that's really not a good depiction of Minnesota. There's a lot more pine forests and things like that. There's farmland, but there's still a lot of forests, especially the farther north you go. Like when you're in Lake of the Woods, up there, it's just a big forest with a lot of lakes. So there's a lot of nature where something like the Jersey Devil can survive. There's a lot of different cryptid creatures that live in the United States of America, and a lot of them live and hide in places like national parks or big undisturbed areas of forest like northern Minnesota. So you'll run into the Sasquatch vacationing up here. You'll run into dogmen, like I've gone over in the past, and the Jersey Devil. Now, it's not a particularly smart creature. Some of the things I've discussed in the past, like the Sasquatch, like the skunk ape, like the dogmen, are intelligent creatures that either have a proclivity towards being good, like the Mothman, or a proclivity towards being evil and uneducated and violent, like the Dogmen, whereas the Jersey Devil really isn't intelligent enough to have this sort of good-evil scale. It's like an animal. It doesn't really have a morality to it. It just needs to kill and eat. Now, they have a really long lifespan, so you've got a Jersey Devil. It'll live 100, 200 years like a turtle, like one of those tortoises, or like, it can live that long. I would say the more average lifespan time is more similar to like a crocodile, where they can live as long as they can continue to eat. Like, most people might not know this, but things like saltwater crocodiles, they'll just keep getting bigger and keep getting bigger, and they don't really die from old age. There are some big ones out there that live a long time. Rather than old age, when they continue to grow like that forever, like a crocodile would, they end up dying of starvation from not being able to physically kill and eat enough. And that's the sort of lifestyle that the Jersey Devil deals with, where they could live a long, long time if they have a good food source. So, the one in New Jersey that gives it the Jersey Devil its name, the one that sparked the myths was probably young when it started doing all this, because they get a bit crazy when they're young, and they sort of get better at their job when they get old. So I think it did a lot of killing, a lot of spooking, a lot of scaring, a lot of hell-raising in its youth. But then it stuck around and continued to... It scares people over time, but it's less prominent now. It might even still be alive now. That's the sort of lifespan we're thinking of, if it's able to find a good food source. Now, I don't know if New Jersey is really the best hunting grounds anymore, but the Pine Barrens, from what I know, are still pretty unsubstantiated. Like, you can't really just smooth in there and build a condo. They're still kind of the Pine Barrens. They're not just a nice, calm neighborhood or something like a lot of areas have been turned into over time. And I have to say, hunting the Jersey Devils, it's a lot of work. These things are violent, they're fast, they can jump, they don't make a lot of noise, and they don't leave a lot behind. That's the thing. And I've gone hunting them with my brother, and he's a bit too impatient for hunting the Jersey Devils, because you really gotta go and go and go and wait and go, if you understand what I mean. The one time together that me and my brother actually ran into one, it's funny, we weren't even really hunting a Jersey Devil, we were going out hunting some deer, and he has this trapdoor Springfield. It's an old rifle that the United States Army used back before we started using like bolt actions, when we started to have cartridges, but before we decided that being able to fire more than one in a row was a good idea. And the trapdoor, you plunk in one round, you get it ready, you fire, and you plunk in another round. Now, like I said, we weren't going out hunting something big, so we didn't have any of our big gear. We had that trapdoor Springfield, and I had my backup pistol, which is a Smith & Wesson 500, and I like to keep something big on me at all times, just in case that I do run into something that I wasn't expecting. It's the same idea behind concealed carry, where you always have a gun with you, even if you're not expecting to have to fight someone. If you need it, you want it. That's the idea. And that's why I keep the Smith & Wesson on me when I'm going out hunting or, out in the wilderness at all, because I know that there's these things out there. So it just makes sense if you follow me. And this is a 5.500 round. It's very big. It's a 5-shot revolver. It's a big gun. It's no match for a big rifle, but it'll do you. It'll make a lot of noise. It'll do a lot of blunt damage. out fast. Maybe not enough to kill something big, but definitely enough to do some damage and heft them, unlike the round that the trapdoor fires. And I also had just a, I can't remember which one it was, but it was one of my 22 rifles just for plinking a little bit, and we threw that in the truck and I brought it along. I wasn't planning to shoot at anything because, we were hunting for deer, so I didn't really want to make too much noise and spook anything, so I wasn't planning on firing it. And we were up there in the stand, and it was getting pretty late. We were thinking about heading back to the truck and driving back to our campsite, and we started hearing this noise, and we thought, hey, that must be a deer out there, right? But no, as it turns out, it wasn't. It was moving pretty fast, but then it slowed down. It was creeping along, and we stopped hearing it until we started hearing this growling, this heavy breathing that you wouldn't run into with a deer. And it didn't really sound like a bear. We run into some black bears up in Minnesota, and it was definitely not a black bear. So we were kind of worried. We didn't know exactly what we were dealing with. And then we looked around behind the stand, and there it was. There was this big four-legged lizard thing with this big snake-like head and big sharp teeth, sort of like a crocodile, jagged, uneven teeth. And they have this long, winding tail that's like sort of thrashes around a little bit, like slowly, but it doesn't just sit there. It'll like wag around, I guess, is how you would say it. And their eyes do glow. It's like a crocodile, if you've ever seen that. It's just this bright. If there's ever any light, it reflects it out. And so, it's a scary thing to see this sort of thing. And they definitely do hunt and consume humans. I wouldn't say we're their primary prey, but if it runs into us and it's hungry, it'll eat a human, if you follow me. So I had the trapdoor at the time, and I fired around. It was sort of just a gut instinct, fire at it. And of course that's not going to kill it, but I hit it up behind the front shoulder. So it was a good hit, I would say. It wasn't a kill shot, but it definitely got its attention. So it lets out this loud screech. And I turned to my brother and I tossed the Springfield at him. He manages to catch it, and he starts fumbling to get another round while he's fumbling to get this other round out. This thing is definitely planning to come right at us. It starts knocking over some of the brush that it was hiding in to sprint at us. And I pull up my 22, and I'm like, I start thinking as I'm pulling it up to my shoulder, and this is a semi-automatic. It has 10-round magazines, and I fired a few shots at it as it was starting to come at us, and I was like, this isn't going to do anything. So I dropped the gun. You don't want to drop loaded firearms that often, but this is a life and death sort of scenario. I was going to get clawed up and bit and maimed if I let it. Well, clawed up, I'm thinking of something else. This thing has hooves, like I said, so I could get trampled and bit, but mostly worried about the mouth. That's what it does its killing with. So I reach behind me to my back holster, pull out the revolver. I fire those 4 rounds as fast as I could, straight into its face, its neck, its front legs, as it's charging. And that, firing those 500 rounds just that fast, my wrists were aching. Couldn't fucking like you have your ear protection in, but even then it's deafeningly loud, and everything else around, all the wildlife and everything, just goes dead silent. So in the wake of this, it's so quiet. And as we get our bearings again, bright flashes, all that panic, we look around and the thing's still on the ground in front of us, and it's struggling to get up on its front legs. It had fallen over, and it was definitely still alive because it was thrashing around, waving its tail around, thumping its head into the ground and getting angry. And at this point my brother was chambering the round and getting it ready to fire at it again. And I reached down for the 22, and this Jersey Devil, it manages to get up and it sprints past us, and it slams into my brother. It shoulder tackles him almost and knocks him into me, and we both fall over. And luckily this thing was hurting, and it decided we weren't worth the effort because it then just kept running across the field. And my brother managed to get up and fire one more round, but it wasn't gonna finish it off at this point. And it managed to get into the tree line on the other side. We went after it for a little while after we reloaded, gathered our wits. We tried to follow it for a little bit, but we weren't going to get anywhere. And we came back the next morning after heading back to the campsite, and we tried to follow the blood trail for a while, but eventually just the blood went, the trail went cold, and we couldn't follow it anymore. I think these things, they have a pretty good metabolism, so I think it scabbed up, wasn't bleeding as much, and it managed to just find a way to keep us from tracking it. So yeah, like I said, it escaped. That was our experience with one of these, because like I said, we don't usually hunt these because it takes a lot of work to track one down. It's really pure luck that we ran into it, and I'd be interested in managing to smack one down and bring it back, but I like to go hunting in a two-man group, and unless I got my brother or one of my buddies with me, it's a bit, you don't want to go out there alone, because if you don't come back, who's going to know? So we don't really go hunting these things, these Jersey Devils. So my advice, if you were going to be hunting a Jersey Devil, bring something like an AR, an AK, something semi-automatic with a high capacity magazine where you can fire 20, 30 rounds into it as fast as you can pull the trigger, or something, a shotgun, 12 gauge, 10 gauge, something that you can fire a few buckshot into, or a few deer slugs into, bang, pump, bang, get 4 or 5 rounds into it. Something heavy that'll bring it down. Those are the two that I imagine most people would be like an AR or a shotgun of some sort. But if you could get something like an anti-tank rifle, or like a duck punt, something like that, something really big, really spooky that's going to smash it down in one blow. You want something, like I said. And even then, these things are, if you've ever heard of like berserkers, or like a honey badger, these things, they just go crazy when they're down, when they're hurting. They just go, red in the eyes. Everything goes red, and they thrash around and scream around and shriek and run away and slam into anything in their path. It's a spooky situation. So I would suggest just avoiding these things, because it's not. They're animals when you come down to it. It's a type of animal that science refuses, the government refuses to acknowledge it, but it's not like the Sasquatch, where it's an intelligent life form that we could benefit from interacting with it. This thing is just an animal. You're not going to get an essay. You're not going to get it to read, a poem or set up an interview with it. It's like a big, scaly, violent wolf thing, and that's all you're gonna get out of it. The best you could get is kill one, show its body, and hope that enough people see it before the government tries to shut you down, that it gets recognized, because that's another concern. You start trying to bring the remains out there. There's a good chance that unless enough people see it and believe it and are able to verify it before the government comes, the government will come and they'll take it from you, and they'll force you to shut up one way or another. So that's the truth. That's the here and there of it. If you ever run into any of these things, get away if you can. If you can't, try and hit it down with enough firepower that it won't get back up, or it will go buck wild like a bat out of hell. And you don't want to be on the other end of it. Like my brother was lucky. He got a sprained shoulder, and his leg got fucked up for a while from getting body tackled by this thing. He was lucky enough not to get trampled or bitten, because these things, they're not healthy. So I think we'll let I think I'll end the video here. It's been a little while. We've been out doing some work, so I haven't been able to make as many videos recently, but I plan to keep it up. So if you have any things you would like to know about, you can leave a suggestion for me if you want. Otherwise, I'll just do whatever comes to my mind next. So have a nice one, everybody.